All right, so this is to help you guys prepare for the FRQ, which is on Wednesday, tomorrow. I graded the multiple choice and they were not great. So I wanted to kind of help you guys out here. So hopefully you're watching this. If you watch this and you got a buddy in the class, text them, tell them to watch this, because I'm practically telling you exactly what you got to do on this FRQ. Okay. I made a little list here. I don't know if you can read it. I made it pretty small because there's several things, but this is basically, if you can do these things, you should be good on tomorrow's test. Okay. So let's go through these things up here and make sure you guys can do these things. All right. Because you couldn't do it on the multiple choice for some reason. So here we go. So the first thing you got to do is you're going to have to be able to label consumer surplus and producer surplus. So we have our supply curves going up. We have our demand curve going down. We have our equilibrium price right here, labeled Q1, P1. I'll go ahead and label my axes as Q and P. So consumer surplus is defined as the difference between what you are willing to pay and what you actually pay. Because if you think about it, it's a good thing. We want consumer surplus, because if I say I'm willing to spend $100 on these headphones, right, but I only have to pay $40 on them, I have a surplus of $60. I would pay $100. I only have to spend $40. So I have an extra $60. That's awesome. That's great. We want that. Well, that willingness to spend is measured by the demand curve. That's what the demand curve is. Whenever you remember we did in class, I said, how much would you pay for, how many Skittles would you buy if they cost this much? How many Skittles would you buy if they cost that much? That's your willingness to buy Skittles, or whatever it was. So in this situation, the demand curve is your willingness to buy. Your supply curve is your willingness to produce, your willingness to sell. We said if DVDs cost $1, how many would you put out for sale? How many would you produce? If DVDs cost $30, how many would you produce? That's why it has that positive relationship. So consumer surplus is the area below the demand curve and above the price. So this area right here is my consumer surplus. Producer surplus is the area above the supply curve and below the price. The difference between what I'm willing to sell it for and how much I'm actually selling it for. Total surplus is just both of those two things added together. Okay. And total surplus is good. Okay. So label consumer, producer, and total surplus. If you can do that, you should be good for a couple of problems on there. Show what happens after equilibrium changes. I think this was a test question on the multiple choice question, basically saying what happens to, I think it said what happened to producer surplus if equilibrium shifted to the left. So let me just erase this real quick. So go back to before I label this. Should just try to do it because that one's ugly. So if we said supply curve shifted to the left, we have a new supply curve. Here is our new equilibrium, right? Well, where is our surpluses now? Below, it's the same thing, except we have a new supply curve, right? We have a new equilibrium. So our new consumer surplus, same thing, below the price, above the price, below the demand curve. So that would be our new consumer surplus. Our producer surplus would be above the supply curve, below the price. So that would be our new producer surplus. So if we are selling fewer units, if our quantity goes down because our supply shifted to the left here, we're going to have less surplus. If it shifted to the right, we'd be selling more units. Those triangles will be getting bigger as we go to the right. We would have more surplus. Okay. Taxes. We had to talk about taxes. I'm going to skip dead weight loss for now because that's going to come into account with the taxes stuff. Let me find my eraser. Excuse me. All right, let me draw a new curve. We have our quantity, we have our price, we have our demand one, we have our supply one, we have our equilibrium price and quantity, P1, Q1. Okay, so here we have our consumer surplus, here we have our producer surplus. Okay, now let's say this is the graph for whatever, toys. And the government comes in and puts a tax on toy producers. What is that going to do to the graph? Well, it's going to shift the supply curve up by the amount of the tax, because producers would only sell this many if they get this much money. Well, the only way they're going to get this much money now is if they charge the amount of the tax more. So at every one of these quantities, they have to charge the tax. Instead of a 50-cent tax, they have to charge 50 cents more at every quantity. So we shift the supply curve up by the amount of the tax. You can put S2. Sometimes you see it labeled S1 plus tax. Doesn't really matter as long as you're illustrating that we have a new supply curve because of the tax. Here is our new equilibrium, which you'll note is not raised up by just the amount of the tax, right? It doesn't go up that point right there. That is not the new equilibrium. But the tax is the difference between those supply curves, because we just said we shift the supply curve up by the amount of the tax. So if you have to calculate the per unit tax, you just need to find one spot on this graph where you can tell the difference between these two. So if I labeled, P0 here or whatever, right? If I had actual prices on there, you could do the difference between these two and the difference between those two. It should be the same, okay? All right, so now where is our surpluses? What happens to our surplus now because of this graph here? I'm going to erase some of these lines here just to make it cleaner. All right, so I'll keep this one because we need that one. It's the same thing. This consumer surplus is below the demand curve and above the price. Well, here is our new price. P2 is our new price. Here's our demand curve. So this right here is our consumer surplus. Producer surplus is above the supply curve and below the price. But this is where it gets tricky. It's not below this price because this is not the price producers are getting. This is the price they're paying now. As a consumer, I'm paying P2, right? I'm giving the producer, let's just say $100. Let's just say that's the equilibrium price. I'm giving the store $100. They don't get to keep all 100 of that because they have to pay the tax. Let's just say it's a $20 tax, right? So I pay $100, but they only get to keep $80. I'm just making those numbers up. And it's above the supply and below the price they get to keep. We go to the old supply curve here because that's their original willingness to sell. And there's my producer surplus. Consumer surplus, producer surplus. Now we have this big box in the middle here. This area right here. What does that represent? Well, we just said the difference between the two lines is the tax. So right here is the tax. This is how many units we're selling, and it's a per unit tax. So this area right here represents the tax revenue. So if it asks you to calculate the tax revenue, you calculate the area of that box right there. If it asks you to calculate consumer surplus, that's up there. Producer surplus is this box down here, producer surplus. I don't know if you can read that or not, but I just labeled it. Now we have this weird little triangle over here. Where's another color? I don't want to ruin my orange. I think we had a blue over here. So before the tax, all of this was surplus. If you remember, before the tax, whenever I drew that first graph, all of that was surplus. We are not buying and selling this many units anymore. We're not buying and selling Q1 anymore. We are now at Q2. So this is no longer surplus. It used to be surplus, but it's not any longer. Lost surplus is called dead weight loss. So if it asks you to calculate or label dead weight loss, it's that little triangle here of lost surplus. Okay, that's bad. We don't like to lose surplus. That's a negative and inefficiency in markets is dead weight loss. And we're going to calculate dead weight loss more and more throughout the year. Okay. So there we go. Now we can label consumer producer surplus, total surplus. We can show what happens as equilibrium changes. We can label dead weight loss. We can calculate per unit tax. We can calculate total tax revenue. Total revenue is just price times quantity. So that would be P2 times Q2. That would be this whole box here. They're selling whatever, 100 units for, sorry, yes, I'm still here. My thing is trying to kick me out. They would sell 100 units for $100 or whatever. I don't know if I said what Q2 was, right? That would be your total revenue, just price times quantity. Okay. And then surplus after the tax would be this consumer surplus after the tax, this producer surplus after the tax. You don't usually get a question where it says what's total surplus after the tax, because usually they ask you beforehand, so you can just do one big triangle. But if they did, you just add those two together. No big deal. All right, so that's kind of that section of the test, if you will. You're going to have to label all those things. You're going to have to calculate all those things. So make sure you understand those. If you don't, talk to me and we can do some more practice, but you're running out of time. The next part is price elasticity of demand. This one is just as simple as you're going to have to calculate it. I'm going to give you a demand curve, something like that. And I'll say you go from point A to point B. And if I give you some prices, you should be able to calculate that. Oh, I didn't do the incidence of attacks on that last one. Shoot. I'll come back to that at the end. Okay. So let's do some prices. Let's say that this is $1.10 and this is $1.02. A little dollar sign to emphasize that. And we'll say that this is 300 units. So at $1.10, we buy 300 units. At $1.02, we buy 347 units. Okay, I'm making this math hard on myself here. So price went down, we bought more. To calculate price elasticity of demand, it is percent change. That's what that means, change in quantity divided by percent change in price. Okay, to calculate percent changes, it's the difference over the initial. So difference over initial. That's how you do percent changes, right? If I went from $5 to $10, the difference would be $5. It went from 5 to 10, so that's a $5 difference. The original price was $5, so I would take $5 over $5, and I have a 100% change in price. Price went up 100%. Okay, so we got to do the same thing here. We'll start with our quantity because that's in our numerator. Okay, so we take the difference. Let's say we went from A to B. So that means the price went down. That means the quantity went up. So the difference is 47 because you could subtract if you need to, but it's pretty simple. It's 47. So my difference is 47 units divided by the original quantity. The original quantity was 300. So 47 divided by 300 equals 0.156 repeating. Okay, so we're going to say 0.157. We're going to turn that into a percent. That is a 15.7% increase. So quantity went up 15.7%. Okay, so that is our percent change in quantity. Now we need to do our percent change in price. Price went down 8 cents from $1.10 to $1.02. So the difference is 8 cents, 0.08, and it's a negative because it went down. Okay, the negative doesn't really matter unless we're talking about cross price elasticity or income elasticity, because then it will tell us a little bit of extra information. But for just regular old price elasticity of demand, doesn't matter because it's always going to be negative. Because if the price goes up, we're going to buy less goods. It would be a negative quantity change. If price goes down, we're going to buy more goods. So a negative price change causes a positive quantity change. So our difference is negative 0.08. Sorry, I keep clicking my phone so it doesn't go to sleep on me. What is the original? It is $1.10. Okay, so we take 0.08 divided by 1.1 equals 0.072 repeating. Okay, that is 0.072. We'll even just say 0.073. We'll just round it up like we did to the last one. Okay, so 0.073, we make that a percentage. That is a 7.3% change. And we're going to say that's negative, as that would be a negative answer. It would have been negative 0.073. So it's negative 7.3%. So now we have our equation here. Percent change in quantity or percent change in price. Our percent change in quantity is 15.7%. Our percent change in price is negative 7.3%. So 15.7 divided by 7.3 equals 2.15. So we're going to have a negative 2.15. That is our price elasticity of demand for that segment. Negative 2.15. What does that mean? That's the next thing I have over here is interpret elasticities. What does that mean? That means we had a price change, right? We had a small price change, a 7% change in price that caused a bigger change in quantity. So price went down 7%, but we bought 15% more. So that means it is elastic because the absolute value is greater than 1. So that would be elastic demand. If it had to do with cross price elasticity, right? Cross price elasticity is saying the price changed on this one, the quantity of another good changes, a substitute or a complement, right? So that negative does tell us something there, because if the price went down like it did here and we bought more of another good, what does that make those two things? Well, if the price goes down and we buy more of the other good, if the price goes down to something, we buy more of that thing. And in this situation, we're buying more of that thing and more of the other thing, right? So that would be a complement. If they have a negative cross price elasticity of demand, they are complements, because the price went up, we bought less of this other thing. The price goes down, we bought more of that other thing. Okay, so they go together. If there was a positive number, they'd be substitutes, because if the price went up, I'd buy less. If the price of Coke goes up, I buy less Coke. If I buy less Coke, I buy more Pepsi. So we have positive relationship between the price and the quantity here. And you might be confused by trying to compare the quantities of the goods, but it's not quantity to quantity, it's price to quantity. And what I mean by that, if the price of Coke goes up, the price went up, we buy less Coke, but we're going to buy more Pepsi. So it's the price went up, causing the quantity of the other one to go up. Okay. Income elasticity, that's kind of the same idea here, except it's not price change, it's income change. So if I said incomes went down 7%, you make 7% less money and you're buying more of this item. Which type of item is that, right? If you make less money, which types of items you're going to buy more of? Are you going to go out and buy a steak dinner if you get demoted from your job? Probably not. You're going to go buy ramen noodles or mac and cheese, right? So if they have a negative answer, then it is an inferior good. Income goes down, you buy more of it. Income goes up, you buy less. If you get a raise at work, you get a promotion, and you double your salary, you're going to buy less Kraft mac and cheese. Okay. But the other, if they go the same way, it's a normal good. If I make more money, I go buy more steaks. That would be a normal good. So make sure you can interpret those. Let me take a peek here at the test, make sure I'm kind of covering everything here. Price controls.
Cassidy Carter, if you're still in the building, please report to the front office. Cassidy Carter.
Cassidy Carter, go to the front
Please
office.
report to the front office.
Price control. This is kind of the same thing as taxes. It's going to cause dead weight loss. We have a supply curve, we have a demand curve, and most of you fell into my trap, and I tried to warn you. I tried to warn you 30 times that I said, I'm going to try to trick you, and I'm going to put a non-binding price control. Okay, so here is our price. I'm going to say it's $7. Here's our quantity. I'm going to say it's a nice even 100 units. Okay, hopefully you can see that. You can kind of see that. So we have a demand curve here. Mix in my markers just for you guys. We have a price of $7, quantity of 100 units. Okay, the government can come in and say, you know what, that price is too low. Producers need more money. They can't survive off selling this for $7, so they need to raise the price. How do they raise the price? Well, they need to set a limit, right? They need to set a limit that you can't go below. We don't want them to get to $7. So they would set a control up here. They want to raise the price to $9 per unit. They need to set a price floor. Floors go above, ceilings go below. As counterintuitive as that sounds, that's how it works. So you can't go below that price floor, right? Well, what happens now? Well, at that price floor, at $9, people don't want to buy 100 anymore. Price went up, so they wanted to buy less. We'll just say that's 80. So at the price of $9, people want to buy 80. Well, the price went up. What happens to suppliers? They're thinking, heck yeah, I'm going to make more money. So they're going to produce more. So we go to the supply curve. We'll say that's 130. So whenever we are above equilibrium, that is where surpluses occur, because we only want 80. but they are making 130. So we have way too many, and students fall into this trap all the time, where I'll say, is it a surplus or shortage? The answer is a surplus. How much is the surplus? And students go, oh, well, we were doing 100, now we're doing 80, so it's 20. That's not, this 100 doesn't matter anymore. This 100 was only when we were at $7. When we're at $9, we want to buy at 80, but they're producing 130. So there is a surplus of 50 units right there. 50 too many are being made, okay? Another question people like to ask, or the College Board likes to ask, is if there is a binding price control here, how many will be bought and sold? Well, this is kind of a trick, but also kind of easy, because we kind of said it. If the price goes up, people want 80, but they're making 130. So how many are going to be sold? Well, people only want 80. So that's how many are going to be sold. People, I mean, however many is being demanded is how many is going to be sold. Okay. So this is how many will be bought and sold. 80. Well, where is our surpluses? Surplus is below the demand curve, above the price. So there's our consumer surplus, right? Where it normally is. Where's our producer surplus? Well, this is a situation where they don't have to pay taxes on this. There's no tax involved here. The price is $9. They're getting $9. So it's below $9 all the way down to the supply curve. So this weird shape, I don't know what you call that, kind of looks like Indiana. Well, what do we have over here? This used to be surplus. It's not anymore. So what would that be? That would be deadweight loss. Okay, so we see deadweight loss on these price control charts also. But you know what? I could trick you. I could be mean, just like I was on the multiple choice. I think on that multiple choice, I think like 3 people got it right, where I gave you a price ceiling above equilibrium. Because what if I said the price was $7 and they set a price ceiling at $9? How many would be bought and sold? Well, it'd still be 100, because it wouldn't have done anything. A price ceiling has to go down here to be effective. A price control floor has to be up here to be effective. Okay. Last thing, just real quick, because I forgot to do it on the other chart, is that what's it called? Incidence of attacks. I can't remember what it's called. So we have our supply 1, we have our demand 1, we have our equilibrium price, equilibrium quantity, right? Label my axes. Got to label your axes. So we shift the supply curve up by the amount of the tax. So supply 2, here is our new price. Okay. Who is paying the tax? Who is actually paying the tax here? Now, I didn't do you any favors because I just drew a pretty generic curve here. They're both about the same shape, right? But when they have different elasticities, it's going to be one paying more than the other. But the way you figure this out is you look at what they used to pay. Let's just make a number here. Let's say $7 again. Before the tax, they were paying $7 and they were buying and selling 100. After the tax, now the price is $9. So consumers are paying $2 more than they used to. So they're paying $2 of the tax per unit. Let's make this one, let's say $3.50. So whenever we go up here, this is the new price. But remember, I pay $9. They don't get to keep all $9. They have to pay the tax. And the tax is the distance between these two curves. So we go down to the old supply curve. They get to keep $3.50. So how much of the tax are they paying? Well, they used to get to keep $7. Now they're paying $3.50. So they are paying, what's my math here? Should I make that a 4? It doesn't matter. $3.50 of the tax. So in this situation, and I know those aren't really like to scale, but I just wanted to change it. In this situation, the producer is paying more of the tax than the consumer is. Incidence of a tax is who's paying more. Here's your producer surplus. Here's your consumer surplus. There's your dead weight loss. Okay. If you can do all of those things, if you can do them confidently, all those things I just gave you, you should get 100% on this test. Okay. If you can't, study, go watch videos. There's like 3 or 4 different great econ videos online. If you watch this video all the way up to here, on the bottom of your test tomorrow, write the word, what word can I have you guys write? Write the word, I don't know, it should be easy. How about Mario? Okay, write Mario on the bottom of your test tomorrow, and when you turn it in, I'll give you a piece of candy. But don't tell anybody who didn't watch the video, because if everybody gets candy, I'm not doing it anymore. Okay. I'll try to make these videos more often for tests, but it's just hard with all the AP classes, especially testing on the same day. So yeah, tell somebody if you know somebody in class who doesn't know about the video. But yeah, write that on your test tomorrow. Let me know if you have any questions. My kid's got a softball game tonight. It's a late one, 7:30, but if you email me, I'll try to get back to you before bedtime. Okay, good luck.